February 19, 1945, the first wave of U.S. Marines stormed the black sand beaches of Iwo Jima. They expected a bloody fight, but what they found was worse: an eerie, unsettling silence. The island seemed deserted. The artillery bombardment, the most intense of the entire Pacific War, had seemingly wiped out all resistance. But as the Marines pushed inland, the island itself erupted. Machine guns, mortar, and artillery fire rained down from unseen positions, turning the beachhead into a slaughterhouse. The Marines weren't fighting an army they could see. They were fighting the island itself. This was no ordinary battle. This was a descent into a carefully constructed hell, designed by one of Japan's most brilliant and ruthless generals, Tadamichi Kuribayashi. Before the Americans even saw Iwo Jima on the horizon, Kuribayashi had transformed the 8-square-mile volcanic rock into the most formidable fortress in the Pacific. He knew he couldn't stop the American landing. He also knew he couldn't win. His goal was far more sinister: to make the price of Iwo Jima so catastrophically high, to bleed the Americans so severely that their will to invade the Japanese mainland would be shattered. He studied American tactics, especially their reliance on overwhelming firepower. He realized that traditional Japanese defenses, beachfront bunkers, and glorious, suicidal banzai charges were useless against the American war machine. So he ordered his men to do the unthinkable: dig. Iwo Jima became a hollow island, a subterranean fortress. Underneath the volcanic ash and rock, Kuribayashi's 21,000 men constructed a labyrinth. Over 11 miles of tunnels honeycombed the island, connecting more than 1,500 man-made caves, chambers, and command posts. These weren't just simple tunnels. They were multi-level complexes with ventilation systems, ammunition depots, hospitals, and barracks, all buried deep beneath the surface, impervious to American bombs and shells. Each cave was a weapon. They were designed with multiple, interlocking fields of fire. A single machine gun nest could be connected by tunnel to half a dozen different firing positions. If one position was knocked out, the crew would simply retreat through the tunnel and pop up somewhere else, continuing the fight. This created the terrifying illusion of an enemy who could not be killed. Kuribayashi's new battle doctrine was radical, and for the Japanese military, almost heretical. He issued a strict set of orders. First, there would be no glorious deaths. He explicitly forbade the traditional banzai charge, calling it a useless waste of manpower. Do not expect to return alive, he told his men, but their deaths had to be meaningful. His second order was the core of his entire strategy. Each man will kill 10 Americans before he himself is killed. Third, and most chillingly, they were to fight from their hidden positions until the very end. They were to become ghosts in the rock, an invisible army that would harry, torment, and bleed the Marines for every inch of ground. This wasn't about honor. It was about attrition. Every Japanese soldier was a component in a giant, island-sized meat grinder, and the Marines were about to walk straight into it. When the Marines landed, they were walking into this perfectly laid trap. The initial lack of resistance was a deliberate tactic. Kuribayashi had ordered his men to hold their fire until the beaches were completely clogged with men and equipment. Then, and only then, would he spring the trap. The signal came, and from hundreds of camouflage positions in the high ground overlooking the beaches, especially from the slopes of Mount Suribachi, a storm of steel was unleashed. The Marines were caught in a kill zone with nowhere to hide. The soft volcanic ash made it impossible to dig foxholes, and vehicles bogged down, becoming easy targets. They were fighting an invisible enemy who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. They couldn't see the Japanese soldiers, but the Japanese soldiers could see every move they made. Mount Suribachi, the dormant volcano at the southern tip of the island, was the linchpin of Kuribayashi's defense. It wasn't just a mountain. It was a 7-story, concrete-reinforced fortress, honeycombed with artillery positions, observation posts, and machine gun nests, all interconnected by his tunnel network. Its height gave the Japanese a commanding view of the entire island, especially the landing beaches. From Suribachi's slopes, artillery observers could direct fire with pinpoint accuracy, turning the beaches into a fiery hellscape. Taking Suribachi was the Marines' first and most crucial objective, but attacking it was a suicidal prospect. The mountain's steep, rugged terrain offered little cover, and every approach was covered by interlocking fields of fire from countless hidden pillboxes. It was a geometric trap, a fortress designed by nature and perfected by a master of defensive warfare. The Japanese defenders were confident, almost certain, that their fortress was impregnable. They had endured weeks of relentless bombing with minimal casualties, tucked away in their subterranean world. They believed the Americans would break before their defenses did. They had the terrain, the element of surprise, and a fanatical devotion to their mission. They were prepared to fight and die in their tunnels, turning every cave and pillbox into a tomb for themselves and as many Americans as possible. For them, Iwo Jima was the final bulwark protecting the homeland. Failure was not an option. They truly believed their honeycomb defense was unstoppable. But the Americans had a weapon the Japanese hadn't fully accounted for: fire. Standard tactics were failing. Grenades were thrown into cave mouths, only to be thrown back out. Pillboxes were blasted with explosives, but the crews would just retreat into the tunnels. The Marines needed a way to get inside the fortress, to clear these positions permanently. The answer came mounted on the back of M4 Sherman tanks. These were the flame tanks. Modified Shermans, officially designated the M4A3R3 Zippo, could spew a torrent of jellied gasoline napalm over 100 yards. This wasn't just fire. It was a liquid inferno that clung to surfaces, flowed into crevices, and sucked the oxygen out of enclosed spaces. The arrival of the flame tanks changed the horrifying calculus of the battle. Where a squad of Marines might spend hours trying to take a single pillbox, a flame tank could neutralize it in seconds. The process was brutal and terrifying. A tank would lumber into position, its steel hull deflecting machine gun fire. The crew would aim the nozzle at a cave opening or a bunker slit. Then, with a loud roar, a stream of fire would erupt, engulfing the position. Anyone inside faced a horrific choice: burn to death, suffocate as the fire consumed all the oxygen, or run out into a hail of Marine gunfire. There was no escape. This was the weapon that could finally counter Kuribayashi's invisible army. It was hell on tracks, fighting a hell built into the ground. The flame tanks, supported by demolition teams with satchel charges and bulldozers to seal cave entrances, began the grim, systematic work of rooting out the Japanese defenders. It was a slow, terrifying, and claustrophobic war, fought yard by yard, cave by cave. The Marines developed a brutal but effective rhythm: locate a position, suppress it with rifle fire, bring in the Zippo, and douse it with liquid fire. Then, demolition teams would move in with explosives to seal the entrance, burying the defenders, dead or alive, inside their own fortress. This relentless, gruesome tactic was the only way to break the honeycomb defense. The Japanese soldiers who had been ordered to fight to the last were now being entombed in the very positions designed to protect them. Even with the flame tanks, the battle was an agonizing ordeal. Every day was a relentless grind. The Japanese fought with suicidal bravery, holding their positions until they were literally burned out of them. Kuribayashi remained in his command bunker deep underground, directing the battle, making the Americans pay for every single foot of volcanic ash. But the outcome was inevitable. On February 23rd, after 4 days of savage fighting, the Marines finally reached the summit of Mount Suribachi and raised the American flag. But the battle was far from over. The flag raising was a symbolic victory. The northern half of the island, where the bulk of Kuribayashi's forces were dug in, still had to be taken. For another month, the fighting raged on. The flame tanks continued their grim work, slowly incinerating the Japanese resistance, one bunker at a time. By late March, the battle was finally drawing to a close. Kuribayashi, his command post surrounded, sent his final message to Tokyo: Then, he is believed to have led his surviving men in a final desperate attack, finally breaking his own rule against Banzai charges. He died in the fighting, his body never definitively identified. Of the 21,000 Japanese defenders, almost all were killed. The American casualties were staggering. Nearly 7,000 Marines killed and 20,000 wounded. Kuribayashi had achieved his goal. He had inflicted unsustainable casualties, making Iwo Jima the costliest battle in the history of the United States Marine Corps. The island had been taken, but the price, paid in blood and fire, was a chilling testament to the hell he had built on the Sulfur Island. Engineering Hades, the birth of the Zippo tank. Before the Zippo tank rumbled ashore, the primary tool for flame warfare was the man-portable flamethrower. First appearing in World War I, these devices were terrifying psychological weapons. A soldier carrying one could project a jet of fire into a trench or bunker, forcing enemies to either surrender or be consumed. By World War II, the US military had developed models like the M1 and M2 flamethrowers. These were standard issue for combat engineers and were used extensively in the Pacific. However, they had serious limitations. An operator had to get dangerously close to the target, usually within 20 to 40 yards, exposing themselves to intense enemy fire. They were a high-priority target for any Japanese soldier with a rifle. Furthermore, the fuel tanks were heavy, cumbersome, and carried only enough fuel for a few short bursts, lasting just a handful of seconds. In the dense fortified jungle terrain of islands like Guadalcanal and Peleliu, this was a deadly trade-off. A better, more protected, and longer-lasting delivery system was desperately needed. The solution was to put the flamethrower inside a tank. The idea of mounting a flamethrower on a vehicle wasn't entirely new. The British had pioneered the concept with their Churchill Crocodile, a heavily armored tank that towed its fuel in an armored trailer. The Americans, however, took a different approach, aiming for a more integrated design. Their canvas was the workhorse of the U.S. Army and Marine Corps, the M4 Sherman tank. The challenge was to install a powerful flame weapon without compromising the tank's primary function as a gun platform. Early experiments led to the development of the Satan tank, a light Stuart tank with a flamethrower, but it was the Sherman that offered the perfect balance of armor, mobility, and available internal space. The breakthrough was replacing the hull-mounted machine gun with a powerful flamethrower nozzle. The main 75mm cannon was kept fully operational, meaning the tank could still fight like a standard Sherman. This new configuration was officially designated the M4A3R3, but the troops on the ground gave it a much more fitting and now famous nickname, the Zippo, after the popular and reliable cigarette lighter. It was a dragon in steel armor, ready to breathe fire on the enemy's strongest positions. So what made the Zippos fire so devastatingly effective? It wasn't just about squirting burning gasoline. The liquid fire was a sophisticated and terrifying chemical concoction. The key ingredient was napalm. Developed by chemists at Harvard University, napalm is a gelling agent that, when mixed with gasoline, creates a thick, sticky, slow-burning substance. Unlike regular gasoline, which would flash and burn out quickly, napalm-thickened fuel clung to surfaces. It stuck to the walls of bunkers, seeped into crevices, and adhered to anything and anyone it touched. This created an intense, long-lasting fire that could raise the temperature inside a confined space to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, consuming all the oxygen in the process. The fuel was pressurized using compressed carbon dioxide, stored in high-pressure cylinders inside the tank. When the gunner triggered the weapon, this pressure would force the napalm gel out of the nozzle at high velocity, igniting as it exited. The result was a cohesive stream of liquid fire, not just a spray. It was a weapon designed not just to burn, but to stick, suffocate, and incinerate everything in its path. The operational difference between a man-portable flamethrower and a Zippo tank was like night and day. Where a Marine on foot might struggle to get within 30 yards of a bunker, The Zippo, protected by its thick Sherman armor, could roll right up to it. But it often didn't have to. The powerful pressure system in the tank could project its stream of napalm over 100 yards, sometimes even up to 150 yards under ideal conditions. This was a game changer. A Zippo could sit safely out of the effective range of small arms fire, and even some anti-tank weapons, and methodically douse a target. Imagine being a Japanese soldier in a pillbox. You see a Sherman tank approaching, but it stops well out of range of your grenades. You feel a moment of relief, thinking you're safe. Then, a thick orange-black rope of fire arcs through the air. It smashes against the firing slit of your bunker, and suddenly your entire world is searing heat and choking black smoke. The fire doesn't just burn. It flows like water, finding every crack and opening, filling the confined space with an inferno that consumes all oxygen. For the defenders of Iwo Jima, this was a new kind of horror, a weapon against which their formidable defenses offered little protection. Now you might think that a tank carrying over 100 gallons of highly flammable liquid would be a rolling coffin, an easy target for enemy fire. The image of a tank exploding in a massive fireball is a common movie trope, but the reality for the M4 Zippo was quite different. The idea that flame tanks were exceptionally vulnerable is largely a myth. Firstly, the napalm mixture itself was actually quite difficult to ignite inside its tank. It wasn't like a can of gasoline sloshing around. It was a thick gel, and it needed to be atomized and mixed with air by the nozzle's ignition system to burn effectively. A simple puncture from a bullet or shrapnel wouldn't necessarily cause a catastrophic explosion. Secondly, the fuel and pressure tanks were located inside the Sherman's armored hull, protected by inches of steel. While a direct hit from a powerful anti-tank gun could certainly knock one out, the same could be said for any tank. In fact, standard Shermans carrying high-octane gasoline for their engines and rounds of high-explosive ammunition were arguably just as, if not more, vulnerable to catastrophic brewing up. The Zippo was no more or less survivable than a standard M4. Its crew was well protected, allowing them to confidently get into position and do their grim work. On Iwo Jima, the Zippos proved their worth beyond any doubt. The island was a network of over 1,500 rock and concrete reinforced rooms, connected by 16 miles of tunnels. The Japanese plan was to fight a battle of attrition, bleeding the Marines for every yard of volcanic ash. Standard tactics were failing. This is where the 8 Zippo tanks of the 5th Tank Battalion made their mark. They were called upon whenever a pillbox or cave mouth held up the advance. The tactic was often a combined arms effort. 1 or 2 standard Shermans would provide covering fire with their main guns and machine guns, suppressing the enemy position. Then, the Zippo would move up. The psychological effect was immense. The mere sight of a Zippo preparing to fire was often enough to cause defenders to break and run, or to surrender. But for those who stayed, the result was swift and terrible. A few seconds of fire from the Zippo could neutralize a bunker that might have taken hours and many casualties to capture with infantry alone. Marine commanders on the island credited the flame tanks with saving countless American lives. General Graves Erskine, commander of the 3rd Marine Division, stated that the Zippos were the single best weapon for cracking the island's defenses. They were the key that unlocked the fortress of Iwo Jima. The legacy of the Zippo tank is a complex one. It was an undeniably brutal weapon, a product of a total war where victory was the only acceptable outcome. The flame tanks of Iwo Jima represent a chillingly effective solution to a unique tactical problem. They were instrumental in the American victory on the island, and the lessons learned there influenced the development of flame weapons for decades to come, seeing use in Korea and Vietnam. Today, flame weapons of this type are heavily restricted by international conventions on warfare, and for good reason. They are a reminder of a time when necessity drove the creation of truly terrifying technologies. The story of the Zippo is a testament to the dark ingenuity of wartime engineering, and a sobering look at the brutal realities faced by the soldiers and Marines who had to fight and win the island-hopping campaigns of the Pacific War. The moment of shock, when tunnels became ovens. They heard it before they saw it. The grinding, clanking sound of an M4 Sherman tank, but with a horrifying new accompaniment. A low hiss that grew into a monstrous roar. Then, the world outside their tiny firing slits turned a searing liquid orange. It wasn't just a burst of flame. It was a torrent, a river of fire that defied physics. It didn't just fly straight. It splattered, it clung, it flowed like water, and most terrifyingly, it turned corners. For the first time, the defenders' greatest strength, their network of tunnels, became their greatest weakness. These corridors, designed for rapid movement and surprise attacks, were now conduits for death. American flame tanks, nicknamed Zippos or Ronsons after the lighters, would pull up to a cave entrance or a pillbox opening and unleash a searing jet of napalm. The pressurized stream could shoot over 100 yards, splashing against the rock and then flowing deep into the dark recesses of the tunnels. The screams were the first sign that it was working. Men who were just moments before firing rifles from the safety of their positions were suddenly engulfed in an inescapable inferno. The flame, a mixture of jellied gasoline, was designed to stick to any surface it touched. Clothing, skin, rock walls, it didn't matter. It just burned. The temperature inside these confined spaces would skyrocket to thousands of degrees in seconds, turning the tunnels into literal ovens. But the fire itself wasn't the only killer. It was a thief, an oxygen thief. A single short burst from a flame tank would consume all the breathable air in a sealed bunker or a section of a tunnel. Even those who managed to escape the direct touch of the flames would find themselves gasping, their lungs burning, as they suffocated in the superheated, oxygen-deprived air. The choice was a horrifying one: burn to death, suffocate, or make a desperate, suicidal run out into the open, right into the waiting guns of the Marines. The psychological impact was devastating. Imagine being a soldier, deep underground, feeling relatively safe. You hear the rumble, then you see a flicker of orange light at the far end of your tunnel. It's not an explosion. It's something alive, something that slithers and grows, a fluid orange death that is relentlessly crawling toward you. The sheer primal terror of being hunted by fire in an enclosed space is something few can comprehend. It broke the will of men who had sworn to fight to the last. There was no honor in this death. It wasn't a soldier's end in a firefight. It was a terrifying, agonizing annihilation. Japanese soldiers who had braved artillery barrages and infantry charges without flinching would break and flee at the sight of the flame tanks. American ground troops learned to follow the Zippos closely. The tanks would neutralize a position, and the infantry would move in to secure it, often finding a scene of utter devastation inside. The walls were scorched black, the air thick with the acrid smell of burnt material, and a grim silence where once there was fierce resistance. Personal accounts from captured Japanese diaries paint a chilling picture. Soldiers wrote about the fire-breathing dragons and the day their fortress burned from within. One diary entry described the horror of hearing the screams of their comrades from a connected bunker, knowing the same fate was coming for them, the fire snaking its way through the very earth they had trusted for protection. They described the hopelessness, the realization that their meticulously constructed defenses were useless against this new form of warfare. The flame tanks of Iwo Jima fundamentally changed the nature of the battle. What was planned as a slow, grinding war of attrition, bunker by bunker, became a terrifyingly efficient process of eradication. These machines bypassed the need for costly and dangerous direct assaults on fortified positions. They could reach into the heart of the Japanese defenses and neutralize them in a way no other weapon could. It was brutal, it was horrifying, but in the grim calculus of war, it saved countless American lives by shortening the battle for some of the most heavily defended ground on the planet. The legacy of these flame tanks is a complex one. They were a symbol of technological superiority and a tool of immense psychological terror. On the black sands of Iwo Jima, They proved that even the most formidable fortress can be broken when you find a way to turn its strength into a fatal flaw. They were the key that unlocked the island, but they did so by unleashing a literal hell on Earth. A chapter of warfare that still echoes with the screams from those dark, burning tunnels. Blowtorch and Corkscrew, the brutal tactical shift. By February 1945, the U.S. Marines were bogged down. The Japanese defenders, led by General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, had turned the volcanic island into a fortress. Over 11 miles of tunnels, bunkers, and caves connected thousands of hidden firing positions. Conventional artillery and bombing runs were almost useless. Every time the Marines advanced, they were cut down by unseen machine guns and mortar emerging from spider holes, only to disappear back underground. The casualties were staggering and morale was plummeting. A new approach was desperately needed. Marine General Howlin' Mad as Smith knew he couldn't just throw more men at this meat grinder. He needed a way to neutralize the Japanese pillboxes and caves permanently. The solution came in the form of the M4 Sherman tank, modified with a deadly secret weapon, a powerful flamethrower. These tanks, nicknamed Zippos by the Marines, could shoot a terrifying stream of jellied gasoline napalm over 100 yards. It was a horrifying weapon, but it was perfectly suited for the task at hand. This led to the development of a grimly effective tactic known as the Blowtorch and Corkscrew. It was a two-part strategy that combined the raw power of the flame tanks with the grit of the infantry. First came the Blowtorch. A Zippo tank would roll up to a Japanese bunker or cave entrance. With a deafening roar, it would unleash a torrent of liquid fire, incinerating anyone near the opening and sucking the oxygen out of the air deep within the tunnel. The psychological impact was just as devastating as the physical destruction. But the Blowtorch alone wasn't enough. The Japanese were masters of their underground labyrinth. They could often retreat deeper into the network and re-emerge from another opening to attack the Marines from behind. That's where the Corkscrew part came in. Immediately after the Zippo did its work, a team of combat engineers and infantry would rush forward. Armed with explosives and bulldozers, their job was to seal the deal. They would hurl satchel charges and grenades into the scorched cave entrance, then use the bulldozers to collapse the opening with tons of rock and dirt, entombing anyone left alive inside. It was a brutal assembly line method of destruction. Blowtorch, then Corkscrew, over and over again. Imagine the scene: the ground shaking, the roar of the tank, the hiss of the flamethrower, and then the thunderous boom of demolition charges. This was the daily reality for the Marines on Iwo Jima. The Zippos became the key to unlocking the island's defenses. They were slow and vulnerable, often becoming prime targets for Japanese anti-tank teams who knew how devastating they were. Tank crews faced immense danger, but they pressed on, leading the charge. Coordinating these attacks required incredible teamwork. Infantry squads provided cover, suppressing enemy fire while the Zippo lumbered into position. Demolition teams timed their advance perfectly, rushing in the moment the flames subsided. Radio operators relayed targets, and commanders orchestrated this deadly ballet from just behind the front lines. It was a symphony of destruction, and it was the only way to move forward. Slowly, painstakingly, the Marines began to gain ground. What was once a static front line of attrition began to creep forward, one sealed cave at a time. The progress was measured not in miles, but in yards. Each pillbox taken, each ridge secured, came at an immense cost in human life. The Marines paid for every inch of that volcanic ash with blood. The fighting was intimate, savage, and relentless. The flame tanks were indispensable, but they couldn't do it alone. It was the courage of the individual Marine, crawling forward under a hail of bullets to support the tanks and engineers, that ultimately turned the tide. As the Americans pushed deeper into the island, the Japanese defenders grew more desperate. Trapped in their subterranean world with dwindling supplies and no hope of rescue, they fought with ferocious tenacity. They launched desperate nighttime banzai charges against the Marine lines, only to be met with a wall of steel and fire. The Zippos were often used to break up these final suicidal attacks, their streams of flame illuminating the hellish landscape. In the final days of the battle, the fighting devolved into a grim hunt for the last pockets of resistance. Marines and their Zippos methodically cleared out the remaining tunnel systems, the Blowtorch and Corkscrew tactic being employed until the very end. It was a war of extermination fought in the dark, a necessary but terrible chapter in the Pacific Campaign. The flame tanks of Iwo Jima didn't just break the military gridlock. They redefined armored warfare and close-quarters combat. They were the fiery key that unlocked a fortress thought to be impenetrable, but their success came at a terrible price, written in the scorched earth and sealed caves of that remote volcanic island. The story of the Zippo tanks is a stark reminder of the brutal realities of war and the extreme measures taken to achieve victory. It is a testament to both the terrifying power of military technology and the unyielding bravery of the soldiers who had to wield it. The ashes of Iwo Jima, legacy of the fire dragon. But the Americans had a secret weapon, a terrifying tool of war that would change the face of the battle. The M4 Sherman tank, modified into a flamethrower. Nicknamed Zippos or Ronsons by the troops, these flame tanks, officially the POACWSH-1, were about to unleash hell on the island. Imagine a 30-ton steel beast rumbling towards a fortified position, not firing shells, but spewing a river of fire. A thick, napalm-gelled inferno that could shoot over 100 yards, clinging to everything it touched and burning with unimaginable heat. For the Japanese soldiers hidden deep within the earth, this was a weapon straight out of a nightmare. Let's break down how these fire dragons worked. The standard Sherman's main cannon was replaced with a powerful flamethrower. Inside, it carried hundreds of gallons of a napalm mixture. When the commander gave the order, a high-pressure system would shoot this gel out of the barrel. It would ignite as it left, creating a searing jet of fire that could snake its way into the narrowest openings of a bunker. It wasn't just about the heat. The fire consumed all the oxygen, suffocating anyone inside who wasn't immediately incinerated. The psychological impact was immense. The sight and sound of a flame tank in action was enough to shatter the morale of even the most determined defenders. The effectiveness of these tanks was chillingly clear. On Iwo Jima, flame tanks were credited with clearing over 1,400 enemy positions. Marine commanders reported that a single flame tank could often accomplish in seconds what would have taken an entire infantry platoon hours and heavy casualties to achieve. General Howland Mad Smith, the commander of the Fleet Marine Force in the Pacific, stated that the flame-throwing tanks were the single best weapon of the battle. They saved countless American lives by providing a way to neutralize heavily fortified positions without sending men into a meat grinder. The tanks would roll up, douse a pillbox with liquid fire, and move on to the next. The grim task was brutally efficient, but with this brutal efficiency came a heavy human cost. The use of flamethrowers on Iwo Jima resulted in horrific casualties for the Japanese. Thousands were killed by the flames, often in the most agonizing ways imaginable. While the defenders of Iwo Jima fought with incredible tenacity, determined to die for their emperor, the flame tank introduced a new dimension of terror. Survivors spoke of the sheer horror of seeing their comrades engulfed in flames, of the desperate, futile attempts to escape the inescapable fire that filled their underground shelters. It was a gruesome, visceral form of warfare that left deep scars on everyone involved. For the Japanese, the flame tank became a symbol of the enemy's overwhelming and merciless power. Interestingly, while the atomic bomb is often seen as the ultimate weapon of World War II, for the Japanese soldiers on the front lines, the flame tank was a far more immediate and personal terror. The bomb was a distant, abstract event that ended the war. The flame tank was a monster right outside your door. It was a weapon you could see, hear, and feel. Japanese veterans have recounted that the fear of being burned alive was more terrifying than the prospect of being shot or blown up. This psychological warfare was a key part of the flame tank's impact. The mere presence of a Zippo on the battlefield could cause entrenched units to break and run, or in some cases, surrender, something that was incredibly rare among Japanese forces. The use of flamethrowers, of course, raises significant ethical questions. Was it a necessary evil to shorten a brutal battle and save lives? Or was it an inhumane weapon that crossed a moral line? This debate has continued for decades. From one perspective, war is inherently brutal, and the goal is to win as quickly and with as few casualties on your own side as possible. In this view, the flame tank was a necessary tool that prevented even greater loss of life among the attacking Marines. It was a response to an enemy that refused to surrender and was dug into near impenetrable defenses. The alternative was sending young men to their deaths against machine gun nests and hidden artillery. From another perspective, the deliberate use of fire to burn people alive is seen as exceptionally cruel. International law has long sought to regulate weapons that cause unnecessary suffering, and flamethrowers certainly fall into a gray area. Critics argue that even in war, there should be limits to the horrors we inflict on one another. The images and accounts from Iwo Jima paint a picture of warfare at its most savage. There's no easy answer here, and it remains one of the most controversial aspects of the Pacific War. The reality is that for the men on the ground, these ethical debates were a luxury they couldn't afford. They were in a fight for survival, and the flame tank was a key to living another day. The legacy of the Iwo Jima flame tanks didn't end in 1945. The technology and tactics were refined and carried forward into future conflicts. During the Korean War, flame tanks were used to assault fortified Chinese and North Korean positions in the rugged, mountainous terrain. But it was in Vietnam that they saw their most extensive post-World War II use. The M48 Patton tank was often fitted with a flamethrower, becoming the M67 Zippo. In the dense jungles and village tunnel systems of Vietnam, these tanks were once again called upon to clear out an enemy that was hard to find and harder to fight. They were used to destroy Viet Cong tunnel complexes and fortified bunkers, reprising their role from Iwo Jima in a new and equally difficult war. However, the increasing prevalence of anti-tank rockets and the changing nature of warfare eventually led to the phasing out of flame tanks from the U.S. arsenal by the late 1970s. So looking back at Iwo Jima, what is the final verdict on the fire dragons? They were, without a doubt, one of the most terrifying and effective weapons of the war. They were also one of the most brutal. On the hellish landscape of that Sulfur island, they represented a grim necessity. They broke the back of the Japanese defenses, shortened the battle, and saved thousands of American lives. But they did so at a terrible cost, inflicting a horrifying death on the enemy, and leaving a controversial legacy that forces us to confront the ugliest realities of war. The story of the flame tanks is a stark reminder that in the quest for victory, the lines between tactical necessity and human decency can become terrifyingly blurred. The ashes of Iwo Jima hold many lessons, but perhaps the most potent is the one written in fire.